My life was sport back there. Marketing I got into by accident.
David Jones is the founder of Brandtech, a Gen AI marketing platform. They just raised $115 million on a valuation of $4 billion. And by the way, he raised $300 million to do marketing better, faster, cheaper. He's also the founder of One Young World. How did this all started?
If you'd asked me aged 18, I could be anything in the world. It would either have been a professional rugby player or a professional tennis player.
How did you create your own luck, basically, to find yourself in those situations?
Your career will disappoint you at some point. Pretty much everybody will have a failure, will get fired.
You're not afraid of going back in order to leapfrog forward.
When you make the leap to go set your own thing up, it's like, if it doesn't work out, you've learned a ton. What becomes really, really valuable, and has been this to me for my entire career, is, one of the things that I think all young people should have in their mind is that the second piece of advice would be...
Wow, that is a powerful one. I totally wrote that down. So you somehow, from sport, what got you into the corporations world? Because again, you got to a CEO world, to a CEO of a marketing company pretty early age, but how did that all happen?
So I mean, literally my life was sport. I'd go and play tennis tournaments around the world, play a lot of rugby, and, obviously decided I should probably have some kind of academic qualification. So I signed up for what was the European Union's, EU's first EU-sponsored business degree, which sent me off to Germany to business school. Was in business school there, learned fluent German, had to do my exams in German for 3 years, which was, again, a kind of a big wake-up call. But as part of that, we had people who would come in and talk at business school. And one of them came along and talked about advertising agencies and planning. And it was super interesting. And I decided I should probably go and do an internship in an ad agency. Now, I had to do like a 6-month internship, and I'd planned it all so that I could leave, for a tennis tournament, spend 6 months playing tennis in the US, and get back and start on that date. And I get my 6 months in. And in fact, the internship that I'd lined up fell through. And the dean of the business school was not too happy. Got a very stroppy letter from him saying he couldn't believe I was leaving for a tennis tournament without having secured a final year internship. And back then, email wasn't the thing, so I just picked up the phone, called a whole bunch of ad agencies, pretended to several of them that I was the marketing director of Coca-Cola, and asked to speak to their CEO as I was running a pitch. And 50%, well, everyone put me through, and then 50% of the people I spoke to were like, "You're a complete time waster. You'll never get a job in this industry." And 50% were like, "That's quite smart. I'm obviously not going to see you, but I'll put you in touch with the person who runs our internship program." And long story short, landed on an internship in advertising and kind of never looked back.
Wow. So take me back to that moment. What made you have the courage or the idea to, because again, advertising is a lot about rising above the noise, right? There's a lot of noise in the system. And you could see that a few decades ago to understand that you need to get through. And the biggest thing is, how do I open the door? How did that happen? Did you hear it somewhere? Like how did you even get the idea? And how did you have the courage?
Look, I think there's a thread all about understanding people. And actually that was what fascinated me about the person who came. He was a head of planning from an agency called BMP in the UK, who'd kind of invented strategic planning, and just talking about people and what motivated people and how you change people's behavior. That was sort of the first piece, which I just thought, this is really interesting because I'm fascinated by people and what makes them tick. And I also was really into creativity. And it was a golden era for UK advertising back then was pretty amazing. TV advertising back then, it's a very different world. It was sort of what's going on in the world of tech and Gen AI today is exactly what was going on in TV back then. And then I was like, hey, I want to go on this tennis tournament. I don't really have time to wait for lots of replies. So what's the fastest way of doing it? We just call people. But, are they really going to listen to someone saying, hey, I'm a student, I'd like an internship? No. But if you pretend that you're a big client and you're going to do a pitch, you'll get through to anyone. And then, from then on, it's a bit of a lottery as to what happens.
Oh, this is so brilliant. And I think John Maxwell said it beautifully. He talks about the people pile. And I think, a lot of it is understanding people and how do you rise above the noise. And that is incredible to hear. So you find this internship. How from that in 2005 you became, a really, really young CEO of a global company, Havas. Again, how did that happen, and also how do you adapt to such a big, big role? I mean, that's hard.
Yeah, look, so I think there's another thread which is just about learning from different countries and cultures, and also not necessarily, like, often many of the things I did early on in my career were potentially stupid moves because you're stepping out of something that, like, is what you should be doing. And so, the fast version, I ended up, because I spoke German, getting a crazy amount of responsibility on a pitch, because at the time no one in the UK really cared about pan-European advertising, and I thought international and global was the future. So I pitched with the CEO and the MD. I presented to Henkel's worldwide board when I was 21, and we ended up winning the business, so they asked me to stay on. And so just, firstly, the fact that I'd lived and worked in Germany, that I understood German culture, that I spoke German, gave me a level of responsibility that I would never have had if I'd just been the English intern, speaking English. And then that led to me, wanting my next move. And I moved out to Paris to work at J. Walter Thompson, and I didn't speak French. And I had a really tough time for a year or so, but then I learned fluent French and French culture. And all of those things just add to your learning and knowledge and understanding, and both in terms of cultures, in terms of doing business in different ways, in terms of, particularly if you come from the US or the UK, where you're usually used to sitting at the center thinking, you know how the world is. And actually, no, you don't. So it's good to be on that. And then the language piece. I mean, I ended up CEO of a French publicly listed company. In fact, the only British CEO of a French publicly listed company at the time. I'd never been able to do that, without speaking French. Forget any of the other things. So there was that sort of journey that led me down an international path. But also, my wife and I, we met and we were super interested about not just being in London or Paris. And we decided we would either go and live in, we identified 3 places that had great ad industries and that were really good places to go and live, which were Buenos Aires, Cape Town, and Sydney. We started off going down to Sydney. Both of us got jobs down there. And I arrived down there in 1998. And the piece about taking, when I moved to Paris, I took a salary cut and moved to a more junior role than I'd been doing in the UK. And many people go, that's really dumb, but actually it was the thing that caused the big leapfrog later on. I was, kind of heir apparent to be the next, MD president at Abbott Mead Vickers BBDO in the UK. I was the youngest board director there. I was running British Telecom, which at the time was the biggest account in Britain. And I left all of that to go and work at an ad agency in Sydney called URSCG. But it was that allowed me to launch Australia's first ever digital agency. We were booking at 1.40% of all online media in Australia. We were 4 years in a row Digital Agency of the Year. I became the inaugural chairman of the Australian Digital Advertising Association. And that really kind of put me on the map because I got tech and digital in the global company. And so all of these things sort of at the time, you don't necessarily do them because you think it's going to lead somewhere. But as you kind of connect the dots back, many of the things that at the time seemed like, why would you leave like Britain's biggest and best ad agency, where you're in the pole position, to go and work at some kind of small agency in Australia that, didn't have the best reputation at the time? And it's like, well, actually, that was, if I hadn't done that, I'd never have ended up. So from then, I ended up being asked to do in New York what I'd done in Sydney. So moved to New York age sort of 36, 37. We, turned the business around in 12 months. And a year later, an activist investor took over Havas and said, would you like to be the global CEO of the main ad agency? So I think I was like 37, global CEO. All happened very fast. I went from CEO of Australia in 2002 to global CEO in 2005.
Absolutely incredible. So what I'm hearing, David, on one hand, I'm hearing that you're just not afraid, or maybe you're afraid, but you do it anyway, right? Because different cultures, different countries, different people, I mean, that takes a lot. But then you're also, you're not afraid of going back in order to leapfrog forward. What do you think? What went in your head? Did you know that you're taking a risk? Did you just see the future? Because again, marketing and tech is exactly where you are now. This is your secret sauce, right? But back then, what made you do this move?
So look, I think that one is about the different roles and what you do. And I think, a healthy philosophy is just go, like, what's the worst possible thing that can happen? Ironically, I sort of made up how good my French was when I got offered the job in Paris, because I thought they were going to send me to Germany. And when they said, I'm like, they're going to tell me they want me to go to Frankfurt, and I'm going to say I don't want to live in Germany. And when they said, we'd like to send you to Paris, I'm like, amazing. And then I'm go, shit, it says my French is fluent and it isn't. But you just kind of go, look, I'm going to get there. And either, 3 months in, I'm going to get fired because my French isn't good enough, or I'll kind of bundle through and it'll all work out and it's fine. And I think with all these sort of things, you just go like, well, like, what's the worst case scenario? Well, I mean, even when I set the company up today, like, what's the worst case scenario? I set it up. It's a failure. I can go back and get another big job in advertising. It's fine. It's not. And I think often people are too concerned about what could go wrong. Now, clearly, you don't want to get into having a CV where, you've done 14 jobs in 14 years. But I think if you've been on a career path where you've clearly demonstrated that you're pretty good at something, and not just held down a job but being promoted, you can afford to make mistakes. And so each time it was like, A, what's the worst case that can happen, but also B, the fact that life is bigger than work. I mean, my wife and I had the 4 years we spent in Australia were 4 of the greatest years of our life. They're amazing. I wouldn't give that up for anything. And even if it hadn't worked out from a career perspective, the same with my time in Germany, my time in Paris, they were amazing. So I think don't just think career as well, because often people are sort of because your career will disappoint you at some point. Pretty much everybody will have a failure, will get fired. It's going to happen. So if you make that the defining point of your life, you're not going to have a great time. And then when it comes to the tech side, I just think I'm fascinated, going back to human behavior. We kind of always make the same mistakes. Like, a new technology comes along and everyone goes, well, that'll never be a thing, will it? That's crap. And we've always done this. And I literally remember we launched Australia's first internet agency. And it's hard to imagine this now, but people are like, why are you doing this? You're not a tech company. Now, back in 98, a tech company wasn't cool. Like, a tech company was, Xerox, IBM, kind of photocopier sales. And back then, it took forever to download a photo if you were lucky enough to be able to connect your computer to a line in the wall. And none of us thought that you would ever watch a video, forget a laptop, on a desktop, And now you fast forward to today, and if you can't live stream your favorite Netflix series at 40,000 feet over the Atlantic, you're really pissed off on your mobile phone. But I think we always make that mistake, is we think, we judge now, we think how it is now is how it's always been, and how it is now is how it always will be. So we cannot comprehend anymore a world without our mobile phones. We cannot remember, even those who actually were in that world, that there was ever a time when our entire lives couldn't function. But we also can't comprehend a time where we may not have those anymore, because there may be something way better that replaces them. And I think, we're doing it again. So one of the other parts, when I was at Havas, I thought the creator economy was going to be very big. So back in about 2010, 11, I thought, what's one of the best ways of disrupting Havas and making it super fit for the future? I'll acquire the world's first and number one creator economy company. It's a company called Victors and Spoils, founded by a genius called John Windsor. And it's actually one of Harvard's best-selling case studies. But the reason it's been such a successful case study at Harvard is because we were so unsuccessful. So it's not a successful case study telling the story of how successful we are. It basically tells how unsuccessful we were. And the reason we were unsuccessful, and it's quite, fairly incomprehensible now, is that despite the fact that my shareholder investors thought that buying a creator economy company was a great idea, and my clients adored it, they thought this was fantastic, most people in the organization were like, well, you're mad. Like, we make our money. We have, a small creative department of highly expensive, talented people. And that's how we make all of our money. And how can we possibly say that anyone can come up with an idea? And how can we possibly say that anyone can create? And so the body kind of rejected the implant, and some great lessons through that. And obviously the creator economy has gone on to be what it is. There's 60 million people who make a living in it. But we are doing exactly the same thing with AI and machine generated content. Machines can't create good content. They're terrible. Look at this. And you're like, no, we live this. We've been through this movie once before. And we've been many, many times. I mean, when the Palm Pilot and the Newton came out, they were terrible, and a bit of a waste of time. And we all unpacked them, played with them, put them back on the shelf. And, then somebody invented the iPhone. That's been quite good. And I just think, it's that, and I've always sort of, without ever trying to be naive about what's going to be big and successful, I've always kind of gone, if this improves at the rate with which it probably can, do I believe that most human beings will find this a great, interesting, and cool thing to do? And if they do, then it's probably worth being really interested. And that's why we started investing in AI back in 2015.
Right. And I think one of the favorite quotes that I heard you say at some point is that I think something along the line is the mobile phone, which is so true, right? Made every person into a content creator, but generative AI made every person into an advertising agency or something along these lines, right, David? So I'm
exactly.
And when I heard you say that, I was just like, how? I mean, it's just an incredible way to see this. And now it all, so aligned with Brandtech and what you guys are creating, which I want to go into. But one thing I just want to ask you, because you shared this incredible story, if you will, the difference between being at the top, like a CEO, and number 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, to me feels light years away. What does it take to adapt to such a big role?
I'm not sure it is light years away. I mean, I think, one of the really important things, and one of the great things you learn about playing team sports, and particularly a team sport like rugby, is the importance of team and the importance of different skill sets. And in fact, one of my partners, Emma, early on said, it's amazing you hire such different people. And it's like, well, yeah, because I know what I'm good at, and I don't need someone else who can do that. And I know what I'm not good at, and I need people who are good at that. And I think so. I think I'm not sure it's it's light years away. I think there are some people who would like to be the CEO, the leader. There are other people who would like to be the right hand to the CEO, the leader. There are other people, So, and I think if you want to be the CEO and you want to be the leader, I mean, I think you first kind of be careful what you wish for. It's like might sound great, but suddenly it is it's your neck that's on the block, which if you've got a certain type of personality is fine, and if you have another, you might not enjoy that. But I think people just kind of say to themselves, what do you want to be the founder, the leader, the CEO? And then honestly, I think if you get your head down and just work really hard, you'll get noticed, or you'll get noticed by the right companies. I mean, I think over the years, you heard more and more people. I think Lindsay Owen Jones was one of them. The sort of very famous L'Oreal CEO back in the day, when he was asked, why he was so successful, he just said, I just kept showing up, I kept saying yes, and I kept working hard. And it's actually not that much more complicated than that. I mean, honestly, if I sort of look back on, the last 20, 30 years, I have worked like crazy, And so, I mean, there's a great video. Kobe Bryant tells the story of how he would get up way earlier than everyone else, so he could go to the gym twice every day, so that if everyone else was doing 2 hours in the gym, he was doing 4. After 10 years, he'd done twice as much. And it's, I think it's quite true around business. If you work twice as hard as everyone else, you'll get on faster, you'll learn more, you'll do better. And then, it's from then on, I think, trust your own judgment and your own gut, because by the time you become the global CEO, there are way too many people around you who want to tell you what they think you want to hear.
Mhm.
And what becomes really, really valuable, and Kate Robertson, my co-founder of One Young World, has been this to me for my entire career, is when you've said a dumb thing or got off stage and it actually hasn't been one of your vintage moments, instead of going, that was amazing, they go, that was shit, and I'd never say that again. That's way more valuable than the 80% of people telling you you're just incredible. And so I
Right.
think surrounding yourself with people who will be honest, but at the end of the day, you've got
Right.
trust your own judgment. I think pretty much, like, if I take the entire journey of the Brandtech Group, everybody who I knew who was smart and senior in finance told me it was impossible to raise $300 million with a PowerPoint. Impossible. And and these are really, really talented senior people in big organizations. And
Right.
fortunately, I didn't listen. Or I.
So take me on that journey, David, because I would also assume that it's impossible. So tell me a little bit. You're on this journey, you see this need, but between that and raising 300 million is I mean, there's a big gap. So take me on this journey for a second. Where are we? 2015, roughly?
2014, yeah. So
Okay.
I was in my gardening leave year, and I started raising in 2015. No, look, I mean, I think I was running a big successful holding company, but I could see the frustration from my clients in that they wanted a new model. So I could see a huge need for it. And I could also see, just from that, that case study I told you about, that it's really hard and really complex to change big legacy businesses. They're very good at what they do. But it's, if you look back in history, you can't find a single example of where the big incumbent is the market leader, post the revolution. Just never happens, because all of the things that made them very successful in that world are all of the things that make it really complicated to lead in the next world. And so I think I just had an absolute belief that not only did clients want a new model, but I knew how to build that. But the problem was, if you were solving the issue for the world's global clients, there's no point in being three of us in a loft in Soho, New York, because we're another, adding another company to the 10,000 they're already working with. You're part of the problem, not part of the solution. So the reason for raising the money is I wanted to build a global company. I wanted to acquire businesses that solved our clients' biggest pain points, that were tech or tech enabled. So the start point was say, we'll never buy ad agencies or traditional ad agencies. We'll buy tech or tech enabled companies that solve our clients' biggest pain points and put them together at global scale. We'll have technology and what we called machine generated content and AI as a founding vertical. And we launched saying, look, we think you can do all marketing better, faster, and cheaper using technology. And back then, no one understood what it meant. But the good news was no one else was trying to do it. Today, everybody understands what it means, but everyone else is trying to do it too. But I think it really just came from a passionate belief that this business needed to exist, but the only way that I can deliver it is to raise the money to scale it fast. Because what we wanted to do was solve the problem for the world's biggest global brands. And look, I think the fact that the fact that I think if you trace back every entrepreneur, I mean, sort of the way we like to think about it is that we look at every entrepreneurial story and someone had a really obvious idea. It was really easy to execute. It worked brilliantly, and everybody always knew it would all the time. Like, the truth is 99% of people, probably even more like 99.5, will tell you either your idea is shit or terrible, and will give you all the reasons it won't work. And then no one will give you money for it. I mean, like, we can talk about the 300 million, we raised. We can also talk about all the meetings we had where people thought we were totally stupid and like almost threw us out of the room. And I think that's the other thing. You don't need 100% of people to think your idea is good. We had like
Right.
six investors who thought this is really interesting. Um, and I think we tell the stories as if it was easy. It's really hard. And
Right.
and probably the hardest thing it's not the hard work. It's just that you're constantly in the face of people basically telling you that, well, like, but why? I mean, you can't imagine how many times I heard that there wasn't a need for the business we were building. There's all these big
Right.
global holding companies. Why would a client, and then within, a few years, we work with 8 of the world's top 10 global advertisers, 49 in the top 100, $1 billion in revenue, grown over 20% organically every year since launch. So, actually, there was a need for it after all. And suddenly, we're sort
Right.
of, fortunately, quite a long way ahead in the Gen AI space because, again, we were doing that back when people were like, well, why would you buy a Gen AI company? And then obviously, thank God we did.
Everybody understands now. But so, do you think the reason you had the courage, because again, the rejections is what kills more dreams than anything, right? I mean, it's the rejection, it's the fear, it's the, you heard, too many no's and now you're starting to wobble yourself. Is it because you've been in marketing and advertisement, you knew the world so well. Is it that knowledge of the problem that just made you so, that level of conviction of it's basically who is going to be on board versus if I going to find it?
Yeah, look, I just sat there and thought, I know there's a huge opportunity for this because basically all of my clients are saying this is what they want. I mean, they would say, look, we don't want 300 ad agencies around making TV commercials for us, and I think I sort of, I was sitting there going, actually, I don't want the future of my career to be recommending to my clients what I wouldn't do if I were them, Because when they go, well, actually, couldn't we just do this with 10 ad agencies? Yeah, you could, yeah. But then suddenly your revenue goes. So I'd much rather be on the end of solving their problem rather than trying to
Right.
convince them, that they're wrong when they're right. And so I was absolutely confident about what they were looking for and what they
Right.
needed. And I was pretty confident in my ability to build it. But I was probably even more worried that someone else was going to do it. I'd always wanted to have my own business, and I had a fabulous 15 years at Havas. I loved it. Great place to be, great people. But it almost kind of, every time I was getting a bit restless, I'm been 4 years CFO. Oh, go run global. Oh, go run New York. Oh, run this. So every time I got a bit restless, there was a new thing to do. And then obviously I ended up at the top gig, so there wasn't a new thing to do. But I kind of was sitting there going, someone's going to do this, and I'll be so pissed off if I'm sitting there, 5 years from now going, could have been me, but
darn it.
And then I think that's and then just not like at the end of the day, going back to it, if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. You'll have learned a ton. You leave a big job, and often people would say to me, because I'd fly like crazy when I was a Brit running a French business from New York. So I basically commuted to Paris from New York, which sounds glamorous, but it isn't, because you spend your life in planes. And I was in Paris at least every 2 weeks off and once a week, add, side trips to Asia, Latin America, go to the West Coast. And people would often say, God, your life. And I was like, but I've got a choice, most people can't choose to be the global CEO of a big company. I can choose not to be. So if ever I feel sorry for myself, it's easy to step away from it. But likewise, you kind of, when you make the leap to go set your own thing up, it's like, if it doesn't work out, you've learned a ton, you've learned so much, and you can always go back to that old world and find a job in it if you want to.
Incredible. So, David, tell us a little bit about Brandtech right now, because I know you've had some acquisition, you invest in a lot of companies, and now you put in place, a really interesting platform that combines branding and tech. So tell us a little bit about that because I do want to also go into some of the impact things that you're doing, because again, you're all over. So it's just incredible. But talk to us a little bit about Brandtech.
Yeah, so look, I mean, launched the company in 2015, and I'd always, when I talked about the Australian piece, I was a founder member of the Facebook Client Council, and I sort of sat in meetings when they were tiny and no one thought they'd ever make any money. And so, just watch the speed and scale of technology evolving. And I just was convinced that you could create a better model where you use much more technology to help brands do their marketing better, faster, and cheaper using tech. And I was Googling one weekend and realized that no one was using the term brand tech. So I thought, we'll have that. So trademark brand tech. And basically set off on a journey, which has really kind of exploded in the last 18 months or so. But just to say, let's build that group that helps brands do their marketing better, faster, cheaper using tech. And we started investing in AI back in 2015. We did AI chatbots. We actually did the world's first AI influencer chatbot with Kalani Hilliker for CoverGirl. We were doing AI media planning with Elsie. We're building, doing AI data with Crossing Minds. I went on the board in 2018 of a company called AI Foundation, who were building AI twins of humans. And you can Google a great episode of Jimmy Kimmel where Deepak Chopra takes digital Deepak onto Jimmy Kimmel and takes everyone through a guided meditation. And honestly, the technology's moved on so much since then. I mean, that demo looks really good, but once you were outside of the kind of the safe environment of a demo, things were a bit wilder back then. And all of that led me to look for a company that was making ads end to end using Gen AI. And there was only one, a company called Pencil, built in 2018 on GPT-2 back then. And Will and Samuk, the founders, are brilliant talents, and particularly with Will early on, we had a meeting of the minds around how big we thought AI and Gen AI was going to be. Now, obviously, everyone will tell you now that of course they knew this, but back then no one did, and so we kind of we hit it off, and I said, well, why don't we get together and we can kind of turbocharge what you're doing? He'd built a great platform for SMB. So the brilliant thing about it was, if you've got an SMB SaaS platform, it has to work because there are no people to hold people's hands. But our core clients are enterprise. And I sort of said, look, if you join, what we need to do is build the enterprise product. So we built Pencil Pro and launched that about 18 months ago. And it's being rolled out by many of the world's biggest advertisers. And very simply, what it does is it's a SaaS tech platform that aggregates all of the best models. So, from ChatGPT-4 to Gemini to Stability to DALL-E, Adobe Firefly, et cetera, and it connects straight through to the ad account. So you can publish directly to TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, you name it. And in the center, you basically can decide, what it is you're looking to do. So are you looking for a strategic insight? Are you looking for just an image? Do you want to finish YouTube video or a TikTok video or Instagram video? And you can literally, in minutes, put together content that, historically would have taken weeks. And what we have seen, I think the really unique thing about Pencil, and by the way, it was called Pencil through a belief that it would enhance human creativity, not replace it, that it should be as easy to use as a pencil and as good for creativity as a pencil. Right. But, we've made over a million ads using Gen AI across 5,000 brands, spent more than $1 billion through the platform since 2018. And typically we can deliver 2x the performance, 10 times faster, and at least 50% cheaper.
Incredible. And so, and again, we're spending a lot of money on ads. So, hey, I like the idea of making it easy. So, but on top of everything that you're doing, and we might go back to it a little bit, but on top of everything that you're doing, you decided to also be pretty big on the world of impact. So first of all, you are the co-founder of a global youth forum, right? One Young World, that I think was recognized by the Clinton Global Initiative, if I'm not mistaken. Why is this close to your heart? And you've done also things with Kofi Annan, like that became a pretty big thing for you, the world of impact. Why? Where does that?
Yeah.
Is it in parallel? Like, how do you fit it all in?
No, well, and in fact, I wrote a book back in 2010,
You did.
before it was fashionable, where I kind of basically said that I don't think that doing good and making money need to live in separate worlds. And in fact, the kind of core point behind the book was how social media was going to empower people to hold businesses and leaders responsible, which I think it has. But no, look, I mean, I think if you're born lucky, and I clearly was born lucky, and I say this to my kids. I mean, like, you've sort of got three choices.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason that there's nothing that stopped me from being born into a refugee camp in Sudan other than luck. And I think if you're born lucky, you've sort of got three choices. You're either you either have a really crap life because you spend every day feeling guilty and why me, or you're a really bad person because you basically, well, of course I'm special. I couldn't possibly have been born into a refugee camp, or you kind of go, look, I can't do anything about the fact that I've been born lucky and given a lot of opportunities, but what I can do is try and give back and help people who are less fortunate. And so that's sort of been a constant theme throughout, back in Australia, doing a lot of work for the Children's Cancer Institute. And I met Kofi Annan. It was a really defining moment of my life, and did his climate campaign. And he had a huge impact on me, probably the person beyond my parents who had more impact than anyone, and just such an incredible, wise human being. And we miss people like him today. And it just got, it sort of really re-energized and reinvigorated this. Well, hang on, how can we do more? How can we do more about doing good in the world? And Kate Robertson, who is my co-founder and was my kind of partner on the work front back in Havas days, we were always talking about how could we do more. And she came to me and said, why don't, at the time I was young, we were the youngest ad agency now. We said, well, we should do something with young people. We can help empower young people. And so we, put this whole idea together about how can we give a platform to brilliant young leaders around the world. And so I trotted off to Google Zeitgeist, 2008. I think this video is still on the internet, and I actually watched it the other day, and it's aged quite well. And I had a video from Kofi Annan, a video from Bob Geldof, and a video from Desmond Tutu, all saying they thought this was important. And I think, sorry, just to set the context, this was a time when, the mobile phone, the iPhone had just been launched. So the iPhone was just coming out, and social media was in its infancy. But we sort of sensed that there's a really interesting moment happening where, for the first time in human history, the youngest adults in the world, they're not just the most responsible or the most knowledgeable, but they're also the most powerful, because they understand how to use these platforms better than anyone. And so the idea was, how do we give them a bigger platform? So created One Young World. And today it's the world's largest forum for young leaders. We write the largest checks every year to young leaders initiatives around the global goals. And they're exceptional young leaders. We have the summit in 2.5 weeks in Montreal, but we bring together 2,000 incredible young leaders from 195 countries. So, that one of the things that makes it really unique is you have the world in a room, all of whom are driving massive change and impact. In fact, it's statistically 5 times harder to get a scholarship to come to One Young World than it is to get into Harvard. But they, these are Time 100, members. They're Nobel Peace Prize nominees. They're extraordinary young people, and they're not people who will lead tomorrow. They're people who are already leading. And then what I did is I gave equity in the company to One Young World. And hopefully one day that's going to be worth a lot of money, and we'll be able to get a lot more done. But it's a registered UK charity and 501c3, and it's the impact and the work that the young leaders do is quite remarkable. We publish an impact report every year, and we've now impacted the lives, or our One Young World ambassadors have impacted the lives of over 50 million people. So it's it's sort of, I think it's one of the things we say at One Young World every year. it's amazing where some of these little ideas can end up. I kind of think back to going to Google site guys saying, hey, we've got this idea, we want to create this platform for young leaders. And then suddenly, I remember we were on stage with like Kofi Annan and Desmond Tutu and Bill Clinton, and oh my God, what are all these people? And this year we've got everyone from Jane Goodall to Sylvia. We got incredible people coming, and you sort of, it's amazing where these little acorns lead.
Incredible. And again, it sounds amazing what you're saying, and what you're doing. And I think it's also the execution, right? I mean, I think in your book, Who Cares Wins, you actually have a beautiful quote, and I may be butchering it a little bit, but you talk about different corporate social responsibility. And one of the quotes that I loved, I think it was from Lee Scott, the CEO of Walmart, at the time. And it said something like, we will not be measured by aspirations, we will be measured by our actions. And I think that is such a good, right? I mean, it's like, it's basically what you live for, which is really interesting because you're also taking action. You're not just thinking about it, which is probably the difference with a lot of people.
Well, the other quote I love is I think it's the Henry Ford one. No one ever built a reputation based on what they said they were going to do. And I think it's also very true. I mean, I'm not sure how many of your audience are budding or current entrepreneurs, but the number of people who have a business idea they never do. Ideas are easy. I think one of the myths in life is it's really hard. Ideas are really easy, and honestly, whatever your idea is, there's someone else in the world who's had it too. Execution's hard,
right.
And I think that just being obsessively focused on when you've had an idea, just be ruthlessly focused on everything you need to do to make that idea successful.
And I absolutely, that to me is a big one. And I think there's a little bit of a myth today because it looks easy. We talked a little bit about it, right? You see it on Instagram, you see it at TechCrunch, you see it, you see the successes. What you don't necessarily see is the rejections, the how long it take, the overnight success that took 10 years in the making. So I think you don't see those. And so there's like a little bit of this freedom myth. I can have it all. You could, just not at the same time. So let's stagger it up.
No, and
right?
also, we like to kind of have a simple summary. The narrative. Oh, it was brilliant. I mean, I loved. There was one over the weekend, a little video on one of the entrepreneur things I'm obviously following on Instagram. The time that Bill Gates and Microsoft saved Apple by putting 150 million in, and oh my God, I never know. And, I love the Amazon story on every level, but, one of my favorite headlines is it's the front cover of the New York Times about 20 years ago. And it says, Barnes and Noble sue Amazon over their false claims that they're the world's #1 online retailer of books. And you're like, remember that was a credible thing that people might dispute that they were the #1 in books rather than the #1 in everything. But also, you listen to the stories, and the day that Amazon lost 90% of their market cap, no one thinks that Amazon could ever have lost 90% of their market cap in a day. And I think that's the thing. There's that great other quote, which is, when it's good, and I think it's really relevant to entrepreneurs for all of us in life, but when it's good, it's never as good as you think it is, and when it's bad, it's never as bad as it feels. And a tragic example of that is look at Mike Lynch, who was one of the great tech entrepreneurs from Britain. I mean, he must have spent the last 5-6 years of his life thinking he was in a terrible place, extradited to the US, could potentially end up in prison. He obviously died in the tragic yacht sinking. If you could speak to him now and say, would you rather come back and do 10 years in prison? He'd say yes immediately. So you can think that something is really bad, and actually, no, it isn't. There's a lot worse. And likewise, when it's good, it's probably not anywhere near as good as you think it is. But my other fun one was a great guy called Ian Rogers, who ran Beats at Apple and now is at Ledger. But we were chatting once, and I was going to do a talk to entrepreneurs, and was asking for different people to give me their advice. And he said, which I love, he said, someone said to me, if you're given 2 choices in life, always pick the one that's a better story. And he said they were joking, and I've lived my life like that. And I'm like, it's so true. It is so true. Just like pick the better story, because if it doesn't work out, it's still going to be so much more fun.
I love that. So David, but I will ask, I mean, you met, and I think mentors is also a big thing, right? If you can be surrounded by really smart people, it's kind of what you're giving One Young World, right? But if you can be surrounded by really smart leaders, mentors, people that inspire you, that opens your mind to possibilities way beyond, the school and the regular, grind. How did you get into situations where you meet Kofi Annan and people like this? Like, how did you create your own luck, basically, to find yourself in those situations?
Well, look, I think, at a basic career level, you want to be working for the person or people in the company who are clearly the rising stars, because as they rise, so will you. So if you're not, try and get yourself into a position where you are. Then I think, I met Kofi Annan because I was passionate about using creativity to be a force for change. I'd done a speech at Advertising Week in New York, just saying, look, if we really want to celebrate the power of creativity, we should use it to change people's behavior around a subject that really counts, rather than saying, oh, look, we invented Ronald McDonald.
Right.
And a couple of people heard this, and Kofi was looking for someone to do his climate campaign. And so I, flew to Geneva to meet him. And he was just so wise. I mean, literally, we'd never met him before. We became really, really close. But one of the greatest things I ever got to do is I'd co-host his Google Hangouts with him, and I'd fly to Geneva once a month, and we'd have lunch, and I'd just sit listening to the wisest person. But back then, I'd never met him, and he said two things. He said, David, number one, make sure you give me your best people, and number two, I don't want this to be the last time I see you, because he obviously knew that I'd turn up, photo opportunity, and then probably move on. But so that was really, I think a lot of good things that have ended up happening to me, and great people I've got to meet. Actually, the start point has been not how can I meet a really interesting person, but trying to help someone or trying to solve something, which has sort of then indirectly, led to, little silly example. One of our brilliant One Young World ambassadors was, doing something very smart in the business world, and and I was helping him, just advising. And he ended up launching a business with Biz Stone, the Twitter Medium Jelly founder. And through that, I got to know Biz. And then one day we were chatting, and he had the opportunity to invest 20 million in Pinterest. And we said, well, hey, can we invest that? We invested the 20 million in Pinterest and did really, really well.
Not bad.
But all of that happened because my start point was mentoring and helping someone. At no point did I think if I give some of my time up to help this person, it's going to lead to a good place. Right. It just did. And I think often, that karma will happen. And then the more you just get into those, so like the more, when you're seen to be helping someone like Kofi with his climate campaign, someone else is doing really interesting stuff. So, hey, can you, so we got involved in helping Richard Branson with the B team. And so a lot of these things can lead, and so many incredible people I've met through One Young World, all united by a belief that brilliant young leaders are going to create a better future than we've been able to, and let's help them. And therefore you have a kind of common bond and a common platform. One of our amazing counselors, who's been a counselor every year, Bob Geldof is one of them, who's just one of the world's great humans, who created Live Aid and Band-Aid. But Mohammed Yunus, who's now the acting prime minister of Bangladesh, founder of microfinance, has been a counselor every single year, just an incredible human being. And it's a real privilege to get to know these people. But it's all come about because we're united by a belief that we can create a better future if we empower young leaders.
And what I'm hearing, so I mean, you're, your mission, what, we can see your passion. And I think a lot of what you're talking about is this hidden market, which we talk a lot about it, because the best opportunities are not coming in the job boards or whatever. It's like, it's basically based on the story, you tell, and then who knows you and who's going to open the doors for you. And the more you're intentional and strategic about, making sure that you are in this hidden market and people can open the doors for you and you are there to help others and bring value and think good things will happen. Again, that's basically how you rise above the noise. So that is how you get out of the people's pile and you get better opportunities. And am I hearing this correct, David?
Yeah, I think so.
mean,
But I think
basically.
also, I mean, there's an amazing organization called the Marketing Academy, and I do mentoring for them. But honestly, I get every bit as much out of it as I give. I'm
Yeah.
sure, I'm sure I get
Sure.
as much out of it. I'm not sure they get something out of it.
Right.
But no, and I think it's things like that. I think often, it's sort of helping other people ends up helping you. I did just again the year of gardening leave. I went, several times and lectured at Harvard with Mike Tushman, who's the guy who'd done the Havas case. And again, it was nice to going to Harvard to lecture, but I learned so much in those sessions. It was some of the questions and was really interesting and helpful in sort of, perfecting the sort of the business plan and deck for the business. So I think sometimes it's not like, oh my God, I've got to go and help this person. It's actually that
Right.
in doing that, it's going to help you. But then I also think, and I think, one of the things that I've been very focused on throughout my career is promoting senior women and putting women into CEO roles, and I think there's one of the things I would say for like senior women and senior men. I think it's we're still in a world where senior men get a much easier ride than senior women. It's like so much easier. Like, and I was asked to do a talk on behalf of, because I do a lot of things around women in tech, and I was asked to do a talk, and the question I asked to the room was, how many people in the room, think that their gender or race has ever held them back? And obviously not a single white man in the room put their hand up, and pretty much every woman did. And there's a great mug in a shop down the street which says, "Behind every great woman is a great woman." And I think
True.
I think that should be more true. I don't think it necessarily is as true as it should be. But I'm kind of proud of having a great network of very senior female execs who some have mentored me, some I've mentored. But then I think also you end up being in circles where you just meet and get introduced to really interesting people. So things that start by you thinking, okay, this is the right thing to do, it's a good thing to do, end up actually coming back and being a good thing.
And to me, that's so important because although I'm the person that always says, we have our own gifts, we can figure it out, we can break the glass ceiling. But the truth is it is harder. And there are a lot of situations that we're just not invited to the table. And we actually need ambassadors like you that open these doors. So to me, that's really, really important. I love that you're doing
Even
that.
honestly, one of my observations, and I think I have never promoted, and I'm maybe pushing this slightly, but this is directionally 100% true. I have never promoted a senior man into a role, and they've said, "I'm not sure I'm ready. Do you think I'm good enough?" It's much more about time. Like, I'm like really good and it's taking you this long to recognize that. But honestly, the number of times where, I talked to senior women about promoting them and they had asked, are you sure I'm ready? Do you think I'm ready? In fact, one time, one of our most successful executives in the company today, turned me down the first time I asked her to be the CEO of one of the companies. And then after a couple of years later, when someone had done a not very good job, she accepted the fact that she could probably do better than that, and went. That was several jobs ago. But I think and I think that's the other thing though as well is it's not just about capability. because there is the capability piece. But if someone is constantly asking and pushing, and someone else isn't, wrongly, the
Right.
former might end up getting the gig.
I agree. So we do need to ask, and we need to ask with a lot more courage, and without being apologetic about it. So I agree with that
1,000%.
too. So I agree. But again, I am talking as an Air Force gal, so I also got a little bit of that growing up, at age 18. So I think that prepared me a little better. I think we're just guarding the women a little bit, more when they're, as children, and that makes a difference. David, what would help you with One Young World, or with your incredible Brandtech company?
So look, I would say for One Young World, it's really three things. We are a charity, and it's funny. I have a life where in my day job, people want my money, so they'd like us to invest or buy their company, and then in my night job, I want their money. So no, with One Young World, we are always looking. We have about 300 of the world's biggest companies and businesses who are sponsors and involved. But we never have enough. So anyone who's organized, it's an exceptional accelerator for brilliant young talent and young leaders, and gives an amazing, can give really, really kind of concrete help with purpose and doing good in the world. So number one, anybody whose organization, company is looking to get involved in an organization that is accelerating brilliant young leaders. Number two, we have amazing counselors, but there are people we've never had who we'd love. Michelle Obama. So if Michelle Obama happens to be your aunt or your sister, or then we would love. But no, seriously, I mean, amazing. Sort of the world's moral authorities. We like to have like I talked about Sylvia Earle and Jane Goodall and people like that, and Mohammed Yunus, and we've got incredible people who are the world's moral authorities, and we want more of them and all of them. So anyone who happens to have a connection into one of those people who we've not had at One Young World, once people come to One Young World, they tend to be lifers. They kind of tend to come every year. Once we get them there once, we just got to get them there once. And then finally, just exceptional young leaders with exceptional stories doing exceptional things in the world. We're always on the lookout for that. When you meet someone who has just done something incredible, we'd love to know about them.
Amazing, David. And young, what are the ages for you?
So I mean, we don't check people's passports and evict them, but basically 30 and under. The sweet spot is sort of 20 to 30, because typically sort of sub 20. This isn't always true, but usually under 20, most people haven't really had a big impact in the world yet, and we're really about real impact. It's not with all due respect, hey, someone raised some money in a bake sale at school. It's female genital mutilation abolished in the Gambia, or they had a rape law passed in 37 states in the US. It's that kind of level. And we are a mix of the world of business, the world of charities and NGOs, and the world of politics, the world of journalism. We have a Journalist of the Year award every year. We have a Politician of the Year award every year. I mean, I think, without commenting on the election this year, I mean, the fact that up until recently we were looking at two old white male candidates, neither of whom particularly inspirational, says, shouldn't we get like more young people into politics? That's
a good idea.
And I think it is still one of the ways of driving the most change, the quickest, even, but it's not necessarily a career that young people are drawn towards. But no, it's kind of all encompassing from the world of business, the world of charity, the world of entrepreneurs.
Right. So David, from everything that you're doing, with Brandtech and raising so much money and disrupting marketing and the impact that you're creating, the book, like I can't even like catch up with everything, David. What would be an advice that you would give your younger self?
I might have more than one answer.
Tell me.
No, so look, I think the one of the things that I think all young people should kind of have in their mind is that, you know, you're going to probably go on to do amazing things that you know today you're completely intimidated or in awe of someone, and actually you'll end up doing something that's 100 times bigger than that. I mean, I still remember the day that I got to meet the then global CEO of Havas. I was like, oh my God. And, I ended up being that person and now look back on it as a bit of a small job, and so I think it's really hard to understand when you're just starting out, just how far you can go. So I think the second piece of advice would be just believe in yourself, and absolutely listen to people, and particularly listen to smart people, but at the end of the day, trust your own judgment and believe in yourself, because, and this is particularly true of entrepreneurs, but pretty much everything, any entrepreneur has done, most people have told them is a bad idea. I told my story, everyone telling me you can never raise money with a PowerPoint. I would have stopped and I wouldn't have the company. When we were looking at buying AI businesses, lots of people saying, why are you doing that? So I think just try, don't not listen to people, but believe and back yourself, and the worst possible thing is you're wrong. And actually you learn way, way more when you get it wrong than when you get it right. Because when you get it right, you actually don't really stop to analyze, what you did. You just, of course, and when you get it wrong, you go, wow. And I know it's true that you will learn way more through the things you get wrong than what you get right. And then I think sort of, the final all-encompassing one, I have a big, there's a great cartoonist called Gaping Void who has a sort of cynically funny take on all things business and marketing. And one of them, which isn't a cynically funny one, which is quite, but is something that I think is a great mantra. And in fact, I was asked by a journalist, like, what advice would you give your kids? I'm like, oh, that's an interesting one. Anyway, this cartoon, it just says, did I live? Did I love? Did I matter? And I think, the thing I said to the journalist is I'd say to my kids, when you look back on your life, can you answer yes to did I live? Did I love? Did I matter? And sort of that's kind of my sort of unofficial mantra is that. So, as you're starting out in your careers, it's going to go really fast, but, did you live? You're like, don't forget, as Mae West said, you're only here once. If you do it right, once is enough. Did I love? Obviously, and did I matter? I mean, did the things that you've done, have they really mattered? And I think that there's probably three good barometers to lead a life by.
Wow, that is a powerful one. I totally wrote that down. And I think you mentioned Richard Branson. He says, the brave don't live forever, but the cowards don't live at all, which is sort of, right? There's a little bit of that too. David, this was incredible. Thank you for all the inspiration. And, I think there's an element of always overestimate what you can do in a year, but underestimate what you can do in a decade. So most people never get started, and just seeing how much your pace of doing, and just not being afraid to get going and start. So it's pretty incredible. Thank you for sharing.
It's fun, and hey, what's the worst case scenario? It's like that's the question to always ask. Like, what if it goes wrong? What happens? Doesn't really matter, It's kind of only a job.
So just do it. More episodes that you're going to love are right around the corner. So definitely make sure to click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, who in your life should see this today? Do share this with them. This will inspire and help those you care about and helps us continue to bring amazing guests. And I will see you there.